Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining this week's episode of Behind the Story. I'm Eli Sherman. This week, I'm joined by my co-host, Kim Kalunian of 12 News, and our guest this week is Colleen Cronin of ecoRI News. Colleen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you guys.
So I think most people know, but ecoRI News is a great nonprofit news outlet online that focuses primarily on environmental news. People should go check it out. And Colleen is a total rock star there.
Thank you.
And we wanted to have you on this week because you wrote a great story called Data Shows Providence's Poorest Neighborhoods Ticketed Most for Recycling Violations. Yes, that's right. We're talking about recycling. And you did such a good job with this story, and we're going to get into all the data and stuff like that. But just as a starting point, the thing that really jumped out to me as I was reading through your story is that Providence is the worst recycling municipality in the state. Is that right?
It is. It is the only municipality that's in the single digits for its percentage of recycling.
And what does that mean exactly, being in the single digits?
It means that of the waste that it's sending to the landfill in Johnston, it has the lowered percentage that is recyclable materials.
Right. And I think you mentioned in your story that the state wants you to be at, what, 35%?
That's what they want you to be at. Few municipalities are hitting it, but Providence is the lowest in Rhode Island.
At 7%.
Yeah.
Okay. And so tell us why this story landed on your desk. It's a very data-heavy story,
Yes.
but was there an instance when you're like, I want to look at recycling, or was it something else?
Yeah, so ecoRI has been around for a really long time, much longer than I've been there, 15 years, and recycling and compost and alternative waste streams have been a major feature of our reporting. We started out funding ecoRI by having residential compost. Little known fact, I didn't have to do that, but that was how we started. So it's something that I'm always talking about with my colleagues, and when Providence had initially started issuing tickets for recycling in 2013, like within the first couple of years, our reporters had looked into the data and seen that it was the lower income neighborhoods that were getting the most tickets. And the neighborhoods that, also had higher percentages of non-English speakers. So that's 2013 when they first started issuing those tickets and came up with that ordinance. And, we're more than a decade later. I wanted to take a look at a bigger set of data and see had any of that changed. So made a data request with the city of Providence, and it kind of went from there.
I want to talk to you about the data because there was this great footnote at the end of the story about how you sort of, I know, I geeked out over that. I was like, ooh. So can you talk us through the raw data that you got, how you analyzed it, and how you were able to turn all of those numbers into the story that we read? Yeah,
so I got more than 25,000 data points back, which when you work in Google Sheets a lot of the time, as I do, which is a free service, it's a lot of information. And I also only got addresses back. I knew they were all in Providence, but I didn't have zip codes. And so the easiest way to try to actually place those data points on a map and then also see, we have zip code data from the census that tells us about population. It tells us about demographics. And so I wanted to be able to kind of correlate the numbers to real information about what those neighborhoods and areas look like. Of course, zip codes aren't really where people live, neighborhoods are where people live, but that's kind of as close as I could get. So I had those 25,000 data points. I needed to match them to zip codes to make it actually usable data. And so I coded a Python script, which took a lot of trial and error. I have taken a class on how to, code in Python and to use APIs, which are sort of like messengers that draw information from one place and put it into another. CS people in my life, computer science people in my life are probably going to laugh that I described it the way.
It's incredible, though. I mean, you're not just writing stories, you're coding stuff behind the scenes to make it happen.
Well, it's a lot of Googling. It's a lot of YouTubing. It's getting an error code, and actually ChatGPT and AI, sources out there can help look at an error code and try to help you figure out how to fix it. But once I was able to write that Python script, use the API to draw in the zip code data, which took a long time because, again, it was 25,000 data points. I still had 50 addresses that didn't have zip codes. So then I had to manually try to search those, which, had I had just myself to do this and not used, an API and used coding to figure it out. I don't know how long it would have taken me, because it took me probably an hour to just do the 50. And I still found 14 addresses that didn't really easily match up to a zip code.
I think most of the computer science people in my world would say that they actually do their jobs very much like how you just did. There's a lot of Googling, a lot of trial and error, a lot of trying to figure out what you did wrong. Did you, and I think I might know the answer to this question, but is that how you started your collection of information, or were you talking to people first? Talk to us about your reporting process.
I wanted to look at the numbers first, because I, am talking about recycling and alternative waste streams with people all the time, and people who I was speaking to maybe had a sense that there was maybe more ticketing happening in certain neighborhoods, but they didn't have the numbers. So I thought that I would do a deeper dive myself, and then if the numbers turned out to be something, write about it, and if the numbers didn't turn into something, then it would just be an exercise in using coding and Python and all that stuff. So I really did start with the numbers, having an inkling of past reporting that had hinted that this could be the case, some informal conversations with people, and then once I had the numbers, was able to show it to different stakeholders and people in the communities who were impacted.
I'm hoping we can sort of back up a little bit, because I'm wondering, so I did a story on recycling and sort of the mistakes that we all sometimes, mistakenly make when we're tossing stuff into our recycling bin. We think something's recyclable and it's not. Or I think the biggest thing that people do is they wrap their recycling in plastic bags. And as we've learned, plastic bags will clog up the machines. They shouldn't go in there. There's lots of stuff that shouldn't go into your recycling. But I mean, how big of an issue is this when people put things into their recycling bin that shouldn't be there?
I mean, it's a huge issue. I can even just say, I can say from the numbers because so many people have gotten tickets, but also I can say for myself, I'm paid as an environmental reporter to know what is supposed to go in the recycling. And I still struggle to know what should go in there. I have a little sign up on my recycling bin that tells me what's supposed to go in and what isn't. And I still, I'm sure I make mistakes. So it is really difficult. And the technology behind recycling changes a lot. There's a lot of wish cycling that happens where I think people really hope that they're putting, something in there that's going to get recycled. And then, for instance, like glass that gets put in the recycling now, it doesn't really get recycled so much as reused, like it goes as landfill cover. So really where our items that we put in the recycling end up, you can have a debate about what is really getting recycled anyway out of what's supposed to go in there. So it's difficult.
Yeah.
I think it's super difficult.
Yeah, I think that the thing that confused me the most always was whether or not a greasy thing of pizza cardboard should go in
We
or not.
still debate about that
Yes,
in my house.
yes,
My
yes,
husband
yes.
and I debate about that.
Well, we're just going to take a quick break, and then we're actually going to bring you into the data and show you exactly where these tickets are happening around Providence. Stick with us. Welcome back to Behind the Story. I'm Eli Sherman. Host Kim Kalunian, and we're talking with Colleen Cronin, a reporter at ecoRI News. Colleen, we're talking about recycling in Providence, and I'd like to get specific now. As you mentioned on the top half, you went to the city and you got data going all the way back to 2013. And after some wizardry, data manipulation, you created a great graphic here that I'm going to pull up on the screen, and I hope you can see it. But here is a map of Providence, and it shows every zip code in Providence. And as you mentioned, it's the best you can do in terms of showing different neighborhoods. The darker red is showing where there is more tickets that have been issued versus the lighter areas, which are fewer. And so can you just walk us through exactly where we're seeing the hardest hit neighborhoods here?
Yeah, so this map specifically is looking at numbers total. So you'll see in the 02908 section, which is kind of like, I think of where it's not PC because PC has its own zip code, but around PC, that has the highest number. But you also look towards South Providence, which is 02905, and Elmwood, which is 02907, and those are also high numbers. So I decided to, because populations vary so much in the different zip codes, also take a look sort of at the per capita data. So those 3 zip codes, they have really high just general numbers of tickets, but then when you look at it per capita, it's also pretty high. So the highest of those was 02907, that Elmwood area, which is also a pretty dark color on the map, and that was 19 tickets per 100 people living in the zip code, and that was the highest rate in the city. So happens to also be the zip code that has the lowest median household income and the highest percentage of folks who don't speak or speak a language other than English at home. It's 75% of the area, according to the census. So I think when this is correlation, not causation necessarily, but when you think about it, when you maybe work 2 jobs because you are only working minimum wage, or you don't speak English and a lot of the materials you're getting are in English, it makes a lot of sense that maybe those would be the areas that have these high levels of recycling violations.
And obviously the data that you got was from a pretty long period of time. Were there certain moments where more of these tickets went out, and how does the city decide when to do sort of those like ticketing blitzes?
Yes. That was a new phrase that I learned, ticketing blitzes, during this whole period. So we had a high a couple of years ago during Mayor Alorza's administration, and that was about 4,000 tickets in 1 year. And we've come down a little bit from that, but I reached out to the Smiley administration, and they told me
Providence Mayor Brett Smiley.
Yep. Just Providence Mayor Brett Smiley, and part of the reason why those numbers have gone down was a work issue with folks working at DPW, and also the choice not to do blitzes, but they're going to bring the blitzes back. So, we've seen a little bit of a lull in the number of tickets we've gotten, less than 2,000 a year in the last 2 years since Brett Smiley became mayor of Providence. But I do think we could see those numbers creep back up because they are going to be, doing some blitzes.
I just want to ask sort of a simpler question, which I think if people are watching this, they might come to the conclusion, which is, obviously the east side of Providence has greater wealth, more powerful in politics. They're donors. They're people who are considered movers and shakers in the state, not only in Providence, but for the state itself. And I think that maybe the cynic in me might think, okay, well, you want to garner some revenue for the city. Putting out these violations can get you there. Is it safer politically to target some of these more, lower income neighborhoods, but are also more transient, less likely to vote? We see it happen in different elements of life, and I'm wondering if your reporting showed any of that type of bias.
I think that the folks I spoke to said that, like you're speaking about, maybe there would be some reasons why there were, in general, higher violations. Because, right, this isn't showing where compliance is happening. It's actually just showing where the ticketing's happening.
That's a good point.
So, it could indicate that there's lower compliance in those neighborhoods, but also it just shows that there's higher ticketing. And so, I spoke with Linda Perry, who is the head of the Washington Park Association, which is that 02905, kind of almost blends into 02907 South Providence area. And she did ask the question, she said she sees a lot of recycling violations. She sees a lot of trash on the ground. She sees a lot of ways that the neighborhood, doesn't look like the east side. But she also asked, are they just looking here? And the city kind of said that they were, because they knew that it was an area that had violations in the past. So I don't know if anyone wanted to go so far as to say that it definitely was an area that was targeted, but I do think it was a question that people was certainly asking when I was talking to them.
Yeah, and it begs the question, if they know there are more violations there, are they checking more often in those areas, versus another part of the city? And so I think that your reporting raises a lot of great questions, and you're able to get there from the data. I want to talk about also that there are real consequences to municipalities that do not recycle correctly, right? Because you mentioned every city and town in the state brings, I think almost all of them, bring their waste to the resource recovery of RI. Am I saying that right?
Rhode Island Resource Recovery.
In the Johnson landfill.
Yep.
So can you talk a little bit about tipping fees and the violations that cities and towns see if they don't do it right?
Yeah, I think one great argument for recycling is the environmental impact, but I think another great one, and one that Kevin Proff from Sustainability at the City of Providence brought up, is that there's a real economic impact here for folks. there are tipping fees for regular waste that gets sent to the landfill, and so that's just a cost that each municipality has to incur. And then when they don't self-identify a load that's supposed to be recycling as contaminated, they also get a fine. And so the city estimated that, they're seeing a couple $1 million each year in additional expenses just from the fines alone, not including the cost of the tipping fees, which, are a couple $100s. So it's a huge cost, and that goes down to the taxpayer. And we've seen the tax fight that's been happening in Providence this year. It turns into real life consequences for folks.
And as someone who's been, marinating in this topic for quite some time, how do you think we fix it? Is it just about educating people about what can and cannot go into that bin?
I mean, I think that's certainly part of it. And I think that the city is working on things to try to make it easier for folks, making the bins more consistent, because right now there are a lot of different colors and it's, as I said, confusing for myself to figure out which bin's the right one sometimes. They're also going to work on sort of an outreach program to target folks in their communities, at farmers markets, at libraries. And also they are going to use this smart truck that Waste Management has, and it has a camera on the truck, and it can analyze the loads to see if they're complying or not with recycling. And so then the idea would be to be proactive and sort of be reaching out, giving extra information to those buildings where they're having this happen. Zero Waste Providence is actually doing some of this outreach work, or will be doing it at the end of this year for the city. And they actually reached out to me, which was really cool because they thought my data was so great. And, the city doesn't keep the zip code data with the recycling violations. And so I think they want to use my data to help craft their, outreach and where they want to go, which is really
That's
cool.
amazing.
Yeah, well, you heard it here first. Big brother in your garbage can as well.
Oh, yeah. Yikes.
That's where we're going to have to leave it for today, Colleen. And I want everyone to go read her stuff at ecoRI News. She does such a great job, as does the team over there. Colleen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
All right. And when we come back, the stories we wish we wrote. Stick with us. Welcome back to Behind the Story. I'm Eli Sherman. I'm here with my co-host, Kim Kalunian, and we're entering into our recurring segment, The Stories We Wish We Wrote. It's the other articles and reports that we saw throughout the week that caught our eye throughout the region. And so we'll start with you, Kim. What did you like?
Well, I'm really excited about this shout out this week, Eli, because I get to shout out Catherine Gregg over at the Providence Journal, who we know is just like legendary, and everybody,
the reporting.
Yes, everybody knows Kathy, and she's so great. But I mean, this lead is why Kathy is a legend. So the headline is, "Why a Decade-Old Fight Over Bake Sales at RI Polling Places is Rising Again." And of course, the second I saw that headline, I was like, what? Tell me more.
Bake sales. Okay.
What? And so this is the lead. "Imagine an ACI convict snarling, 'Hey, bub, what are you in for?' And the PTO president replying sheepishly, 'Banana bread.'" Like, how great is that lead? It's so great. So it just really draws you into this story about, is having a bake sale at a polling place during an election a felony? And I guess, I didn't remember this, but I guess there was a column item that was in the Providence Journal at the time in 2014 called Baking Bad. So they're really having fun
Also
with this.
clever.
Also very clever. But it's a funny kind of a story, but I mean, at the heart of it is this issue of like whether there was ever a chance that this PTO could be facing a felony charge if they held a bake sale at this school in Cranston. They did not have the bake sale. But there's this long-running lawsuit that's now sort of like bubbling up again, although I think it's sort of unclear why it's bubbling up and what's happening and how COVID played a role in derailing it. So there's more to come, certainly, with this story, but I had forgotten that this was even a thing until Kathy brought it up again. So,
well, it's so impressive because Kathy has obviously been covering politics in the state for decades now,
Yes.
and to find new ways to really tell a story on a beat that you've covered for a really long time is certainly a talent, and she's got it.
She really does.
I really like this story this week. Is from Bill Seymour at The Independent. He does a lot of work for them. He's been a reporter in Rhode Island and Connecticut for years. And it's called Locals Recount the Craziest Moments They've Seen in South County. And it's a very simple concept. It was just sort of a Facebook post, I think, or somewhere on social media that had just erupted. And he just went through it and just sort of gathered all of these little mementos from throughout, time that people remember. This is the craziest thing that I've seen in South County. And just as some examples, a dad's human carnival ride with shoulder hoisted kids sliding and gliding across slick jetty. And his writing style is just funny to begin with. And it was the perfect topic for him. We got time for more. So
okay, yes. I also wanted to shout out Christopher Shea and Alexander Castro over at the Rhode Island Current for tracking this story that we've now picked up on as well about why the state may miss the DCYF lease renewal deadline in their current building. The union is saying it's really unsafe there. The building is crumbling. There's mold. They're worried about their own health and safety. DCYF says there's this report that's come out that shows the building is safe. But now the state is saying, whoa, let's pump the brakes on this a little bit, because if we renew the lease, it's another 10 years, which is a long time. So we should take another look at this. So, it's a developing story, but came to my attention because of the Rhode Island Current and the great work they're doing there.
Yeah, you never know when there'll be like a flashpoint in
right.
controversy, and what it's going to be. And it's always impressive when a reporter catches that at the beginning of it happening, and already it's bubbling up.
Yes.
As I'm sure it will be an issue for some time between the union and the administration. I just want to give a couple more shout outs real quick. Mark Patinkin did a story in the Providence Journal. How did Dante Bellini convince Ken Burns to do a biopic? First, he had to change his career. Dante Bellini, a lot of people know him in the state. He's been around for a long time, and he left a career in advertising to get into doing documentaries. And he actually did one about where Ken Burns first did his and got Ken Burns involved. Very cool. Mark did a good job, and he had a conversation with him. People should go check it out. The other thing I want to shout out is that our colleagues here at 12 News are actually launching shows as well. We've been around 8 weeks. It feels like forever. But they, Johnny Villela and Mike Montecavo are spinning off their Street Stories feature that they do each week on Fridays on 12 News with a podcast. And our Sarah Ganelli is also launching a 12 Responds 30-minute show where she gets into the consumer investigative beat and goes sort of behind the scenes on that. So they're very awesome. They're all very, very talented people. And so people should check those out as well. That is all the time that we have. It flies by, Kim.
It does.
For people who want to see these episodes, they can find them on our website, WPRI.com. They're also on YouTube. You can also download them now as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll be back next week with our latest, another reporter telling good news. For Kim Kalunian, I'm Eli Sherman. Thank you for watching Behind the Story.